I've seen a lot in my career, and what I list here and go over, there's many more. But I think you have theft is a big one. You have double brokering, which is the hot button word right now that's going on in the industry. There's people that fake insurance certificates out there. There's folks that fake PODs to get paid. There's a lot of fraud within the industry that costs people hundreds of millions of dollars. There's a few different types. It's been around for quite some time. I think the first one is an asset-based carrier that has a brokerage authority, takes a load under their asset authority, and then hands it off or passes it on to their brokerage authority, unbeknownst to the original broker, and finds another carrier for it. In those scenarios, it is double brokering. The carrier who actually moved the freight typically does get paid. They're just moving it away from their asset to the brokerage authority to get the load covered. Now, that could be for a myriad of reasons. It could be because the original truck they booked couldn't do the load, and they said, well, we don't want to service the load and we're going to give it to our brokerage division to get covered. Or sometimes you have the guys who are playing the fraud game and they have an asset authority, but they know they're going to book it with another truck. So they take the load and then use their brokerage division to broker it out and double broker. In that scenario, the only good news and positive news about that scenario is the actual carrier who moves the load gets paid. The one that we're seeing more and more now is affecting the carrier who actually moved the load. So you're seeing guys take loads and they're buying an asset-based authority. They're trying to buy in clean MC numbers because every broker is using vetting tools at this point. And they're trying to sneak through the back doors and basically take a load. They find a different carrier to move the load, and typically what they're doing is they're underbidding the market rate to the original broker, and then they're going and overpaying the truck that they're booking with. And then what they do is they get the POD, the load picks up, it delivers, and then they get paid via quick pay, and then they don't pay the actual carrier who moves the freight. And then what happens is you end up having a situation where the carrier who moved the load gets upset because he doesn't know the original broker, right? He didn't get paid and he has a right to payment. So he's going to start reaching out to the customer. The customer's going to go to the original broker. And now you have this entire mass confusion of what's going on. And by the time that happens, the original broker shut down his authority, has a new authority, and he's out the door. And you don't know where it's at. And that carrier who moved the load has the right to get paid. It's considered fraudulent because contractually, most brokers are contractually saying that you are going to move with your asset and you are not allowed to subcontract this out, right? So that, at that point, is breaking the contract of what is laid out between the broker and the carrier. And it's something that originally was the main method of what has happened. Now, there's some companies out there that their contracts with shippers state, here's our asset-based rate. We agree to this rate for our assets. If we can't move it with our assets, then we'll move it with our brokerage division and we will honor the original rate. That's all different contracts, but the original contract that you lay out with the carrier, if it states you cannot subcontract and that is broken, then now you have fraudulent activity. Red flags at the beginning stages, you're going to have a carrier that provides an MC number, and everyone's going to do the MC number check up front when you're onboarding any type of new carrier, potentially talking about a load. You're going to get phone numbers coming in that aren't the numbers that are listed with the FMCSA. You're going to have email addresses that are different domains than the domain that's listed on the FMCSA website. You have guys that actually will buy a domain to match the domain of the MC number they're spoofing, but switch a letter that's very inconspicuous. Those are some quick red flags. Some other red flags that a lot of brokers are going to, which there's debate going on whether it's if it is fair or not, and I see both sides of it. Inspections, right? Having inspections on trucks, if you're sitting there saying that you report in that you have 20 trucks and 20 trailers and you have 0 inspections on file, that is a red flag. But I also see guys that run locally that we use, that we've had a long career with, and they do great work, but they have 0 or few inspections compared to the amount of their fleet size. So I think that you have an enormous amount of red flags there. Another red flag is going to be, right, and we use the vetting services for this, but you'll have guys, I think I mentioned the cell phone numbers and when they call in on that, but then also the IP addresses, right? So these guys will be booking loads, they're not in this country, their IP address is going to get flagged when they book the load with us. But at the end of the day, you have to communicate with the drivers and understand who you're working with. And if you're booking a carrier on a load for the first time, it has to be mandatory that, hey, we need to speak with the driver. We need to make sure that we're working with the guy that you say we're working with. There's some fleets that say, well, we don't give out driver information. And I think we're going to get to a point where companies aren't going to work with carriers that operate like that. And until they actually have those initial conversations. Now, if it gets to the point that they want to have their fleet managers or dispatchers be the only ones speaking to drivers, and I understand that, and I understand the business case for that. But there still needs to be a pre-vetting prior to that and speaking with the driver. And that's the impact to everybody, the carriers and the brokers. There's quite a few compliance tools. I mean, you're gonna have vetting softwares, right, where you're spot checking an MC number. It's no longer a viable option just to go to the FMCSA's website and check an MC number. The old school days, that's what you did, right? Nowadays, you need to have a software service that's compiling massive amounts of data from FMCSA, right, from business bureaus and census data, as well as other brokers who use that carrier, and they're going to give their feedback on how a carrier operates. And carriers can give feedback on brokers because these softwares are available to both sides. But those are the pre-vetting softwares that are out. There's softwares that are more compliance monitoring softwares where, right, once they're onboarded with you, the contracts are signed, their insurances are validated by a third party, and then that software service is continuously monitoring their status through FMCSA, their insurance status, and any changes in status or operating authority is going to get flagged. And you know, the more sophisticated brokerages out there, and I wouldn't say sophisticated, it's now a must-have. They have the EDI or API integrations in their TMS that if a carrier loses a status, they're automatically flagged. And those are some softwares, and more are coming out. I can tell you the amount of money now that brokerages are spending on just the pre-carrier vetting is going up and up and up. It used to be, you know, for some guys, a 4-figure number, that's going up to a 5-figure number, whether it's monthly or annually, depending on your size. So there's a lot of money being thrown out by the tech companies to get involved with this to help, but there's a lot of money being spent on the brokerage side to avoid this as well. The amount of resources that have to be thrown out to avoid the double brokering, and it's all over the place. Not only the carrier sales teams can't cover as much freight as they did in the past. And you could throw whatever technology you want at it. There's tons of technology coming out of, you know, we're capacity matchers and we do this, that, or the other. At the end of the day, these guys are changing phone numbers so fast, getting new email addresses so fast, buying new MC numbers or buying old MC numbers so fast that you, in a soft market, you're getting bombarded with phone calls. Even if we go through our VoIP software and block numbers or block locations, it just pops up. You block one, 3 more pop up. It's a weed. So our team's strained constantly, and they're constantly looking at that. But the one thing that you got to do and educate your teams on is you got to speak with the drivers. You got to make sure the guys you're booking on loads are the guys picking up the loads. And then you have to work towards building long-term relationships. And I think we do a good job with that first and foremost, are loading the guys up, understanding the businesses of the owner-operators and the small fleets that we work with, and trying to keep those guys moving under our loads that we have with our customers and helping them grow. Ultimately, if you know the carrier's business that you're working with and you understand what they want to do, where they want to go, where their terminals are, where their drivers are from, try to get them home. If you work with them like that and help grow their business, your business will grow as well, and it could help damper some of the double brokering because you're avoiding going out to a new carrier that you never worked with before. A leader needs to step up first and foremost and have situational awareness to what's going on. And that's in any case, whether it's double brokering, you have a cargo claim, you have an accident on the road. I think we need to do a better job in companies in training these scenarios. Throwing out a scenario out there, hey, this happens, what do you do? But number one, first and foremost, I think you have to remove emotion from the equation. A lot of times what I see in my career with folks is they get very emotional to what's going on. They take it personal. Obviously that shipper's freight is like their baby as well in most brokerages' case. And when they have an issue, no matter what it is, emotion plays in. So a leader needs to step up and step in and sit there and say, right, instead of speaking with emotion, you need to speak with facts. What are the facts of the situation? And you have to get into detective mode, and you have to understand, right, what has happened, who's involved, what are the players involved, are there pictures of the trailer, are there pictures of the truck, what's going on? And it's just, I don't think there's a specific scenario to double brokering alone, but I think this is just having that situational awareness. I mean, when we played sports and you were an athlete, you practice scenarios all the time. In football, it was third and short, third and medium, third and long. That was an every Thursday type thing for us, where we drilled those situations. And that's the same thing. As an offensive line, we have blitz pickup. I spent a period, 2 periods, 3 periods in practice every week against that opponent, and we did blitz pickup. So as a business, you have to think like an athlete and have the coach mentality of, all right, we get in this situation, what do we do? And that's going to help with my first point of the emotional awareness of what's going on and diffusing the entire situation emotionally. You got to speak in facts. So I think that helps. And ultimately, transparency. I think a lot of people are hesitant at times to have those transparent conversations with the customers. Now, I think you have to gather your facts first as much as you can, but you can't delay. Almost immediately you have to have those transparent conversations with the customer, because you don't know. I've heard a story a couple weeks ago where this type of situation happened. The customer said, no worries, we got a tracking device on the pallet. Broker didn't know that. The carrier didn't know that. They knew where their freight was. Local police got involved, and that was because of the speed of which they were able to have that discussion. Could you imagine if someone waited on having that discussion and that freight was on an airplane or a cargo ship or on a train to a different country? That's a whole nother can of worms. You gotta know who you work with. It's easier said than done, but ultimately that's what it comes down to, and it's working with the shippers of the freight, right? Not the BCOs, but the actual shippers, whether that's a third-party warehouse or your customer's facility that they're shipping out of. We all sit in office spaces nowadays, especially in the brokerage community. We're not on docks, and I think people need to get on docks more and see what happens there. But at the end of the day, we need help understanding what MC number and who is loading the freight. I think there are shippers out there that do a wonderful job. They're taking pictures, there's videos, there's security cameras, they have that information. But I think it needs to be ingrained more in procedures at warehouses of taking more pictures of the side of doors. Making sure on the BOL, the carrier that's picking up the freight is the actual carrier listed. I think that's another issue through the industry. Brokers on the front end of things, we have to vet carriers. I think most of us now are at that point, but shippers of freight, if you're using a broker, you need to have conversations actively with your brokerages and understand, how do you guys vet your carriers? What does that look like? How do you select carriers? How do you find carriers? What does that look like? And that's hard to do. Every shipper is different, from sizes, shapes, what they feel is of value in their transportation spend, what they want out of their carrier partners, whether that's a broker or an asset-based solution. There's some folks out there that just, they want to book on the truck and they're not really concerned about anything else. There's other folks out there that take a collaborative approach with all their partners and understand, where they add value within their logistics and their supply chain. So it's understanding those parameters and building those relationships, but the brokers have to vet the carriers, and we have to have communication with the driver. If you have a new carrier that you just onboarded, you better have initial conversations with the drivers on the load. Ask for that information, call the guy, and don't just sit there and say, hey, they give you driver information, you don't pick up the phone and try to call that. I've seen that in the past at companies. I've seen guys, I got driver info, but they never called and validated that. check references. If you're working with a new carrier, ask them for other references of shippers or brokers they worked with. Most of them won't give you shippers, but they'll give you brokerages, and have those conversations with their compliance team. We can work together to help find the solution. Because ultimately, I think the carriers that are out there doing a good job, and there are plenty of those guys, they understand that they're the ones ultimately getting screwed here too. It's a headache for them. They're the ones that are going to have to battle this as well, and they don't have the means sometimes to do that depending on their size of their back office. So prevention is key. Making sure you don't get into those situations is critical, but I think it's an open line of communication, of understanding, especially in these relationships with brokers and shippers, is you're the shipper, I'm the broker, this is the carrier, here's the identification of all parties, here's what these BOLs look like and what they do. And I do believe that there's brokerages out there that hide who they are and what they do, right? Because there's so much competition out there in the space. They want to believe, yeah, I'm the truck or whatever it is. And I don't think you can misinterpret that. Right. You need to understand, and you have to drive value with your shippers that you work with of, we're a broker, we're not the actual operating carrier. This is the value that we provide to your team. And part of that value is giving them access to the spot capacity at times based on their customers that order infrequently, or customer demand has spiked on a certain lane. They do need access to spot capacity. They do need a broker to help with that, but identifying and being very clear on the roles in that load and what they do.